For our final speaker, we're going to hear from Kuhan Jeyapragasan. Kuhan currently runs the Cambridge Boston Alignment Initiative, which runs AI technical safety and governance programming, primarily at MIT and Harvard, and previously co-founded and ran the Stanford Existential Risks Initiative. Please welcome Kuhan.
First, wanted to thank Arden and Lizka for some very insightful and inspiring talks. So I'm going to build off, I think, a bit on both of these talks and chat about three main topics. So first, I'll discuss some reflections from focusing on cause area specific field building for the last year compared to my prior focus on more principles first, community building. Second, I'll share a few reflections on advanced AI going mainstream this year, along with the risks associated with it, and some potential implications for the EA community. And third, I'll finish with some thoughts on how we might want to orient to a world that is starting to change rapidly and might start changing even faster pretty soon. I colored my slides using Arden's framework, so first covering what prioritizing dedication over flexibility for the past year has taught me, and for the latter two topics, largely focusing on the value of flexibility when the best ways to do good might change rapidly along with the rest of the world. This coloring is about the only artistic thing about my slides, though. For those of you familiar with the meme, graphic design is not my passion, so I apologize in advance for my slides, but maybe alluding back to Lizka's talk, I could maybe frame this as an exercise in trying to prioritize how I spend my time, focusing on what's more important, like refining the ideas of this talk, rather than, maybe not as important things like having really pretty slides. Although I think Lizka's slides and Arden's are amazing. Anyway, on to the first topic. So, as Francis mentioned, I've primarily focused on AI safety technical and governance field building over the past year, after spending several years primarily focused on principle first field building, specifically encouraging university students to pursue impactful careers and think really hard about how to do the most good. So I had the hypothesis that as students learned about how quickly AI capabilities were progressing, how little we understand about how AI systems accomplish such a wide variety of tasks, expert surveys on the extreme risks AI may pose, and forecasts of how soon we might see these risks, that most of them would see AI with significant concern and uncertainty. Another hypothesis I had is that the framing of AI catastrophic risk mitigation as a difficult technical and policy problem, coupled with the rapid progress we've seen with AI, would appeal to a much wider audience than the ethical, long-term future priority framing around mitigating existential risks from AI that's more common in this community. In practice, the proportion of people who looked at all the things I mentioned and left with significant uncertainty about the future of AI was lower than I expected. And maybe even more interestingly, of the people who took significant action, like doing research or summer internships focused on AI safety, or getting heavily involved with AI alignment student groups, a much larger proportion than I expected, I'd guess over 80% from the students I worked with, were also pretty sympathetic to effective altruism and got involved in the community, even if their entry point was AI safety. Some might say that this could be explained by people who end up sympathetic to EA being more generally gullible and having worse judgment, and dispositionally being more open to ideas independent of their merit. I think there's probably some truth to this claim. Like, some high-profile events over the past year definitely provide reason for pause and humility about this community's judgment. But this explanation is also somewhat challenged by the community's prescience, by which I mean picking up on important dynamics in the world well before many others, AI and COVID being particularly salient examples here. So my experiences this past year, I think, helped me appreciate just how rare it is, not only to really consider ideas that seem implausible or weird at face value, but also how doubly rare it is to actually take actions based on these beliefs, especially when they have to do with ethics and are not socially incentivized. For many, EA provides social norms to ambitiously seek out what's true and prioritize what's best, independent of convenience for ourselves. Of course, there are often significant costs to ignoring social norms, but I think I appreciate more that there is something here to protect that is really valuable and rare that the EA community cultivates for many people. So now I'm going to share some reflections on AI and risks from it going mainstream, particularly in light of GPT-4, and the reaction of the public and major governments like the US and UK to advances in AI. So once again, firstly, I've been impressed at how often discourse within the EA and adjacent communities has been prescient, continually having this reaction with AI, and again with COVID, which was getting seriously discussed on Less Wrong in the EA forum several weeks before mainstream media and others around me started taking it seriously. However, it's unclear how much our prescience has translated into useful action. In the future, it might be useful to focus more on how we can leverage insights about the future into action that helps others. Relatedly, I think both COVID and AI have demonstrated the unoriginal point that understanding how the world works and being able to communicate and coordinate with key stakeholders is really important. And some related points. Historically, many people worried about AI existential risk many of the people worried about AI existential risk were concerned that mass outreach about AIX risk would cause the public and governments to mainly pick up on the AGI big deal message and not the therefore potentially very dangerous and risky message. But in practice, despite the lack of an extremely salient warning shot so far, the public and governments seem to have largely reacted with caution and concern. And maybe a better understanding of public comms and government decision-making could have prevented this misconception. I think it's important to point out that the counter-argument that historically messaging about AGI seems to have been pretty counterfactual in the creation of most of the current frontier AI labs, but perhaps this just underscores the importance of understanding how to do communications well and to model others' actions. Governance and policy have also historically received much less attention and prioritization compared to technical AI alignment in this community. It was foreseeable that governments would get pretty interested in regulating and ensuring the safety of AI systems as AI continued to demonstrate impressive capabilities and started being able to automate parts of the economy. Even more specifically, maybe a lot hinges on the 2024 US presidential election, more so than people may be considering at the moment, and action should be taken to ensure that AI is developed safely, independent of the outcome of the election. As concerns about risks from advanced AI get more mainstream, it becomes even more the case that impactful work opportunities will lie outside of EA and explicitly AI X-risk-focused organizations. For example, as more academics have been getting interested in AI, say through interpretability, or more interested in AI X-risk in general, even more of the best research mentorship opportunities will be in academia rather than at AI existential risk-focused research organizations and programs. As governments are increasingly interested in safety, pipelines and programs to work in governments outside the community, like AAAS, Tech Congress, and the Presidential Management Fellowship, might be more impactful options for many than working at nonprofits or think tanks within the community. Another takeaway, which is a bit more speculative, is that my estimate of the relative value of non-X-risk focused work has also increased. And this is primarily due to decreasing neglectedness of X-risk, which I think is explained by its clear significance to nearly everyone compared to other issues which I expect to be comparatively deprioritized relative to their scope-sensitive, impartial, altruistic importance. So I've listed some candidates from the community for other causes that might merit significantly more attention. I don't yet have strong opinions on how valuable it is for resources to go to these compared to more mainstream issues within the EA community that are also getting more attention. But I think it's valuable for community members to reflect on their cause prioritization in light of these changes. That being said, one misconception I'd like to address is that I think many people might think with so much interest in AI, the field is swamped and it's very hard to contribute. Everything important is covered, or extremely rare skills are required to contribute when that's not already the case. I think this is pretty clearly not true. There are many important topics I can think of with 0 to 2 people working on them full time, like evaluations to assess the ability of AI to accelerate AI R&D. And there are posts with compilations of projects in areas that are neglected online, so I won't go into them in this talk. So lots of value, I think, comes from thinking hard about what's important, seeing where no one else is holding the ball, and becoming an expert in doing the work, even if you don't feel best suited to do it. This has largely been my experience with community building, at the university level in particular. So the last topic I'll discuss is how to orient to a rapidly changing world. So on the one hand, we should expect the status quo and institutions in our world to be less robust to rapid AI progress, which suggests that we should think more for ourselves about how to do the most good. More speculatively, I also think it becomes even more important to act robustly and predictably and cooperate with others in these worlds, and that we should count less on our ability to model the rest of the world and use complicated causal reasoning or consequentialist reasoning to achieve good outcomes. Another consequence of a rapidly changing world is that it seems valuable to more regularly set aside time to reflect on how the world is changing, implications of these changes, and in particular, what new opportunities for impact these changes cause. Acting quickly in response to these changes may also be crucial due to lock-in effects and path dependence. Some other challenges that I think we'll need to navigate in a rapidly changing world. First, there are increasing costs to unilateral action when access to increasingly capable technologies can amplify the magnitude of our decisions, for better and for worse. Conformity and groupthink might become especially costly as well in worlds where original thinking and regular reorientation are crucial for making things go well. And relatedly, power dynamics like centralized funding and conflicting incentives can compromise our decision-making and level-headedness about what is best for the world over the long term, especially when what's best for the world trades off against our own well-being, security, social standing, finances, and more. And these mistakes might be more costly and easier to make in rapidly changing worlds, especially if our core needs are more viscerally jeopardized. So in light of all the above, I've sometimes felt overwhelmed and confused these past several months about how quickly AI and the world seem to be changing, and guilt about not making the right choices. Spending time and sharing space with others who deeply care about helping others as much as possible is really comforting to me and reminds me of how many well-intentioned people like yourselves are out there trying really hard to navigate what might be a pretty crazy time over the next several years. I'm optimistic that this conference can help all of us get a little less confused and prepare for whatever comes next. Thank you.